Hey guys, today we're going to make a homemade acrylic thinner for airbrushes. This doesn't just thin the paint, it also helps keep the adhesion, color, and flow much better, very similar to a commercial thinner. We're going to need a container to mix everything in. I'll be using this plastic cup. We're going to make 100 ml of thinner. We'll also need measuring cups. I have a few different sizes here. For the smaller amounts, I'm going to use a 1 ml dropper, but you could also use a small syringe since those are easier to find. First, we're going to add water. Here I have my bottle of water. We need to add 80 ml of water. These cups only measure up to 30 ml, so I'll need to add 2 full 30 ml cups and then another 20 ml. Alright, now we have our 80 ml of water. Water is the base of the thinner, it's what reduces the viscosity of the paint. Now we'll need alcohol. I recommend using isopropyl alcohol, but if you can't find it, you can also use ethyl alcohol. In my case, I've used 96% ethyl alcohol before. Since we're only using a small amount, it's totally fine. I've made this mix before and never had any issues. We're going to use 3 ml of alcohol and add it to the mix. Alcohol is a stronger thinner than water, so it helps the paint dissolve better. It also improves atomization, giving you a finer spray and smoother flow. You only want to use a small amount, though, because too much alcohol can damage the acrylic base of the paint. At this point, we already have something that can thin paint, but if we leave it like this, the paint can lose a lot of its properties like adhesion, gloss, and durability. So we need to add something that helps preserve those properties. For that, we have a few options. Option 1, PVA glue, white glue, or school glue. This is very cheap and easy to find. I've used it before in other tests, and while it's not the best option, it actually works surprisingly well. To use the PVA glue, we need to thin it first because it's way too thick on its own. We'll dilute it 50-50. For 100 ml of thinner, we need to prepare 16 ml of diluted PVA. First, I'll add 8 ml of water. Stir the glue well. Then add 8 ml of PVA and mix everything together. This will make it much thinner. This mixture can sometimes have little chunks or residue, so before adding it to the thinner, we should strain it through a fine filter. You could use a cloth filter, but I'm using this little funnel with a pipe screen mesh glued to it. The mesh is super fine and works perfectly for this. Once it's filtered, we can add it to the mix. Option 2, this is the option I recommend the most, using an acrylic medium. This is basically the acrylic resin used in paints. It's a little more expensive and harder to find, but it works much better. This is the option if you want something more pro. The medium doesn't need to be diluted. We just measure it and add it directly to the mix. Since it's stronger, we only need 12 ml. Once that's in, we mix everything together. Option 3, using a glossy acrylic varnish. This is very similar to the medium because it also has an acrylic base, but it doesn't have all the same properties as a proper medium. Using varnish is basically the same process as the medium, no need to dilute it. Just add 12 ml directly to the mix and stir. This part is extremely important because it keeps the paint from breaking down when you thin it. It helps preserve adhesion, color, and gloss, which is exactly what you lose when thinning paint with only water or glass cleaner. Now we mix everything together. And the next step is adding something that controls drying, reduces tip dry, and smooths out the flow. For this, we have 2 options. Option 1, vegetable glycerin. This is very cheap and easy to find. I've used it in previous mixes and it works really well, but you have to be careful with it because if you use too much, the paint might not dry correctly or could end up with a rubbery texture. We only need 1 ml of glycerin. If you don't have a way to measure such a small amount, you can count around 20 drops, which is roughly 1 ml. Add it and mix everything together. Option 2, propylene glycol. This is the one I'm going to use. It works better than glycerin, but it's a little harder to find. It has a different texture, does the job better, and it's harder to ruin the mix if you accidentally add a little too much. It helps keep the paint stable while it passes through the airbrush. We're going to use 2 ml of it. Again, you could count drops instead, around 40 drops, or use a calibrated dropper or small syringe. I'm going to clean the dropper before dipping it into the propylene glycol. We add 1 milliliter, then the second milliliter, and mix everything together.
Así que sea así. No, necesitamos.
Now we're going to add some glass cleaner. This works as a flow improver because it contains surfactants. Very important, make sure the glass cleaner does not contain ammonia, silicone, or waxes, because those can damage the paint. This stuff is cheap and easy to find. We're going to add 3 ml of it. I'll use this measuring cup since it can actually measure 3 ml properly. Add it to the mix and stir everything together. And that's it. Now we have 100 ml of our Pro thinner. Next, we're going to bottle it up. We'll need a container, and again, before pouring it in, we should strain it one more time to avoid any large particles that could clog the airbrush. You can use a super fine cloth filter or something similar. I'm going to use the same funnel with the metal mesh again and filter everything through it. There were only a few tiny particles left in the filter, but I highly recommend doing this step anyway. Now we close the bottle. I really recommend these kinds of caps because they're super practical. Alright, now let's do a quick test. I'm going to use this regular acrylic paint. It's not even airbrush paint, but it's going to work perfectly fine. First, I'll shake the paint well. Then in this little cup, I'll add a few drops of thinner and a few drops of paint. The mix is about 1 more or less. I'm going to use this little tattoo machine motor with a mixing attachment to stir everything together. Now we pour it into the airbrush. I always like to start with a few very light coats first, then apply a more solid coat afterward. And that's the result. Now we just let it dry. Here's the spoon once it's fully dry. As you can see, the color looks really nice and smooth. It also dries properly, the surface doesn't feel rubbery or weird. This thinner isn't just useful for paints, it also works for varnishes or pretty much anything acrylic based. Since I use a lot of thinner, I'm making a bigger batch now, and I'm almost done filling the bottle completely. Cap it off and done. Now I'm going to add this label I made so it looks extra cool. First, I'll stick down one side of the label, then slowly peel the backing off so it sits nicely on the bottle. I'm going to use the backing paper from the adhesive sheet since it's really smooth and slippery. That way I can press the label down without scratching it. And that's how it turned out. And that's it. I hope this was useful and that you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to leave a like and share it around. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll see you guys in the next one.